my name is Angel. Welcome back to my channel. The first quarter of the year is now over, so we're just gonna go through some of my reading stats for the first quarter. I read 66 books in January, February, and March, so let's get into it. We're gonna start off breaking it down by month. So in January, you guys can see I read 23 books, which came out to 6,639 pages. I listened to audiobooks for a total of 16 hours and 47 minutes, and that is adjusted to the speed that I listen to. A lot of audiobooks that I do, I read alongside with like a physical copy. I don't do like purely audio a lot of the time, but any hours that I input, I do adjust for my listening time. My average rating for January was 3.7, and 10 of the books that I read were library books. Moving on to February, I read 18 books in February, which came out to a total of 5,928 pages, and I listened for about 17 hours of audiobooks. My average rating for February was 3.6, and I also had 10 books from the library that I read in February. And in March, I read 25 books, so the highest number of books so far, but it's funny because it's actually the least amount of pages. So I was reading a lot of short books apparently in March. Pages read was 5,876. And for audiobooks, I listened to about 14 hours and 2 minutes. My average rating for March was a 3.6 again, and 16 of the books that I read that month came from the library. Now, we are going to break it down by genre. In January, I read 2 fantasy books, 1 fiction, 9 horror books, 1 nonfiction, 4 sci-fi books, and 6 thriller books. In February, I also read 2 fantasy books, 8 horror, 6 romance books, because it was February, 1 science fiction, and 1 thriller. And in March, I read 1 classic, 3 fiction books, 18 horror books, 1 nonfiction, 1 science fiction, and 1 thriller. So that makes my top genre horror. Is anybody surprised? Absolutely not. I read 35 horror books total, and my second top genre, I guess my second most popular genre, was thriller, which I only read 8. So clearly I have my type. I have a type when it comes to books, and that is horror, but nobody's surprised. We've known that. We know that. As far as a readership or audience for everything that I've read, most of what I read is adult, but I have read, looks like 8 young adult books this year, 3 in January, 2 in February, and 3 in March, and then the rest of those were adult books. So looking at the formats for the books that I read, in January, 2 books I read were audiobooks, 7 were ebooks, 5 were hardcover, 7 were paperback, and then I had 2 books where I went back and forth between the audio and the hardcover physical copy. In February, I had 3 books that were audiobooks, 4 ebooks, 4 hardcover books, 6 paperback books, and then I had 1 that was back and forth between audio and hardcover. And then in March, I had 2 audiobooks, 6 ebooks, 8 hardcovers, 8 paperbacks, and 1 that was an audio and paperback mix. So my top format was paperback. I had 21 books that were paperback books. As far as authors, most of the authors that I've read from this year have been new to me authors. In January, I had 14 authors that were new to me, 9 that I had read from before. In February, 11 of those authors were new to me, and 7 I had read before. And in March, 18 authors were new to me, and 7 I had read before as well. So I'm discovering a lot of new people this year, and we love that. This is my breakdown for ratings. The first column is January, the second column is February, and the third one is March. I'm not going to go through all of those, but I did have 9 5-star books, so I just want to talk about those real quick. So in January, my 4 5-star books were The September House by Carissa Orlando, How Can I Help You by Laura Sims, They Can't Kill Us Until They Kill Us by Hanif Abdurraqib, and The Tusks of Extinction by Ray Naylor. In February, my 2 5-star reads were The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston and Head Like a Hole by Andrew Van Wey. And then in March, my 3 5-star reads were The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka, Wilder Girls by Rory Power, and House of Hollow by Crystal Sutherland, which were all books that I read for my body horror reading vlog. So I guess body horror is where it's at for me this year. I luckily have not had any 1 stars yet this year, but my lowest rated book was 1.5 stars, and that book is Lakewood by Megan Giddings, which I read in March. I had 6 books that I DNF'd this year, 2 per month. It kind of worked out really funny. So let's go through those really quickly if you guys are curious what I've DNF'd. My first DNF was on January 3rd, and that book was Manhunt by Gretchen Felker Martin, which I DNF'd at 8% in. It was the first week of the new year, and I knew I was not going to like this book, and I said, absolutely not. We are not starting the year off this way. I'm going to throw this out the window and move on to something that I will enjoy. It just wasn't my type of story, and I could tell from early on that I just wasn't going to like it. My second DNF came on January 18th, and that was with The Remaking by Clay McLeod Chapman. I DNF'd at 62% of the way in. I really didn't like the writing. I love Clay McLeod Chapman. I have enjoyed pretty much most of his other books, so I was really excited to read this older title from him, and it just really let me down. I didn't really care about the plot. I ended up skimming after the 62% mark, kind of skimmed my way up until the ending and read the ending and didn't think it was worth it anyways, so I'm glad that I DNF'd that one. Then in February, I DNF'd Shadows of Carcosa, which is a short story collection that I picked up to read for my cosmic horror reading vlog. A lot of these stories are older stories that were written way back in the day, and I just wasn't really a fan of a lot of the stories, and I just didn't want to read it. And at the end of the day, that's all it comes down to. Also in February, I DNF'd The Handyman Method by Nick Cutter and somebody else that I can't remember. I DNF'd that one at 28% of the way through. I was kind of about 100 pages, maybe slightly before 100 pages, and I just couldn't get into the story. And I'm really, really sad because I feel like listening to people that enjoy that book talk about it, it sounds like a book that I would really, really enjoy. I did look up kind of spoilers of what happens, what the twist is, what the reveal is, and it seems like something I would enjoy, or seems like something I should enjoy, but the story wasn't hooking me, and I try to give a book about 100 pages before I move on, and that one literally had 0% of my attention, and I just had to move on from it. Then in March, I DNF'd Hull 03 by Greg Bear. I feel like the writing left a lot to be desired. Like, it was very difficult to picture things that were happening, to picture the setting, and it really disconnected me from the story. I also felt like it was really easy to see where the plot was going, and after reading some spoiler reviews, I learned that I was correct on where the plot was going, and I just wasn't that interested in it. I don't remember if I mentioned, but I did DNF this 45% of the way through. And my last DNF was Our Share of Night by Mariana Enriquez, which I DNF'd at 29% of the way through. I was not connected to the characters, not connected to the story, and this book was so freaking long that I just didn't think it was worth it to push myself to continue reading. I tried, I gave it multiple chances, and it just didn't hit for me, so I'm sorry. Now, to move on to more positive things, at the beginning of the year, I didn't do 24 in 2024, but I just did 20 books that I wanted to read this year, and out of those 20, I have completed 7. The 7 books off that list that I've read are We Spread by Ian Reid, The Forgotten Island by David Sodergren, Death Valley by Melissa Broder, Black Sheep by Rachel Harrison, The Patient by Jasper DeWitt, The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston, and Powerless by Lauren Roberts. So I feel like I knocked off a really good number so far this early in the year. And one last positive note off of my actual TBR, books that I've read that were already on my TBR, 34 out of 66 books that I've read this year were books that were already on my TBR, which we love. 23 of those came from my TBR on Goodreads, my want to read shelf. 9 of those came from my physical TBR, and 2 of them were in my Kindle library, my Kindle TBR. So I feel like that is pretty good. I'm trying to get those numbers down, trying to read more books that are actually on my TBR. Overall, I would say the year is going really, really well, but that is all I have to talk about so far. So thank you guys so much for watching. I don't know how many of you guys are actually interested in hearing about stats from other people. I feel like it's so much more interesting when the stats are your own stats. But if you watched and you enjoyed, thank you so much for watching. Tell me a little bit about how your reading year is going so far in the comments. I would love to hear. Give me some 5-star reads that you guys have read. And with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching, and hopefully I will see you next time.